Fourth meeting of the San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District Water Resources Advisory Committee. Tom Burhan, District 4, will go around with introductions.
Jim Margaroja.
Angela Ford, County Public Works. Lauren Gauchi, County Public Works.
Chris Reaper, Cambridge Community Service District Alternate.
Marie Van Ron.
Scott Duffield, Heritage Ranch, CSD.
Doug Grossart, Heritage Ranch, CSP. Alternate.
Nick Teague, City of San Luis Obispo.
Martin Sanderson, Cal. Aaron Floyd, City of San Luis Obispo.
Gloria Dean, Public District.
Tim Walters, Development at Large.
Okay, Washington.
Marcia Guthrie, City of Bismarck Beach.
Louis Faber, Rural Engineers.
Stacy Newman, City of Bismarck Beach. Alternate.
Ryan Lodge, Central Coast Water Board.
Jane Gray, Chair, Central Coast Water Works.
Okay, in the front, West.
Beth Thompson, engineer of water utilities, public works, county.
Ellie Husberger, Water Utilities Manager, Spoke County.
Rosemary Gaglione, public works director, Bismarck Beach.
Christine Mulholland, Environmental at Large. John Marks, City Council Member, San Luis Obispo.
Ed EV, Proposal CSD.
David Grader, District 4 Alternate.
Eric Greening, environment at large.
And with Jimmy, Environment at Large.
Steve Stetson, Shannon Center Water District. Chuck Cecilio, Lososo, CSD.
Steve Carter, San Luis Obispo County Farm Bureau.
Peter Brown, OCSD.
I think the road right next to the council. Ann Fletcher, County Public Works Stormwater. James Percent, that's the other one.
All right, and then
Joey Style, County Public Works.
Brendan Clark, County Public Works Committee Secretary.
and do we have people online, Joey?
Yes, we do. So for the folks online, go ahead and announce your name and please feel free to introduce yourselves. Starting with Patricia Wilmore.
Yes, this is Patricia Wilmore, Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance, Ag at Large Alternate.
Julie Tacker.
Good afternoon. This is Jeff Edwards speaking for Julie Tacker. We're from Los Osos. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Jenny Williamson.
Jenny Williamson, County Public Works.
Tim Kershaw.
Tim Kershaw, Cleese Harris, geologist.
This is Lee Nesbitt.
Lee Nesbitt, EPC.
Mark Zimmer.
Good afternoon, Mark Zimmer, Golden State Water Company.
Jules Tuggle.
Jules Tuggle, Grover Beach City Council.
All right, I think that's it. Is there anyone else online we may have missed?
Okay.
I'll just make a note for our members online. Glad you could join us. Cast a vote today. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a quorum present?
Yes, you're 19.
Okay, very good. All right, we'll move on to the second agenda item, which is approval of the May 2nd, 2025 WRAC meeting minutes. Anyone want to motion to approve or discuss a change or correction? Eric.
I will move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
A second, all right. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Very good.
One abstention.
Oh, yes, any abstention. Okay, my apology.
All right, hold on.
Okay.
I got Christine,
Mary.
Mary, okay, and Tim. And I had one more abstention.
I do want to make one comment about the meeting minutes. They are accurate, but I did make a misstatement at the last meeting about the Ocean Well desal project that's being developed. I stated that it was, they had a deployed one offshore at Malibu. That's incorrect. They have one at the Las Virgenes Reservoir submerged and testing near Westlake Village. It's their intention to submerge one offshore, but they have not done so yet. I apologize for the error. I just didn't want to mislead anyone. Christine.
May I follow on your comment?
Yes.
I have intended to share either with here or in the updates
the deep sea desal. There was an article by Ian James in the LA Times about that, so I did notice in the minutes and in the mentioning this, and I appreciate that, and I'm wondering if you mention this again in the update or under future agenda items. My question is, are we going to make sure that this is in our desal possibility studies, because there's so much new that's changing? And is there, should I mention this later for a discussion?
I think later's
fine, but we did hear from staff last month that they are going to include looking at that technology.
They are.
They are.
Swell. Well, if anyone
Okay.
wants to look at this article, it's well written as always, nowadays articles are, but thank you for that. I really want to make sure that with the long range of that project, that we're going to include any new studies and possibilities, and this is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we just, I'm gonna just check. Angela, are you gonna be here the whole meeting? Okay. You can ask during the ongoing updates. Great.
Okay. All right. Then we will go on to item 3, which is a receive and presentation from the Central Coast Water Board Chair and Executive Officer on goals, programs, and projects.
Thank you, Brendan. Thanks, everybody. It's really nice to be here with you all today. Appreciate you entertaining us. My name is Jane Gray. I'm chair of the Central Coast Regional Board.
And my name is Ryan Lunch. I'm the executive officer of the Central Coast Water Board. I've been the executive officer for about a little over a year and a half now. I've been with the water board for over 20 years. I'm a licensed civil engineer. Worked in a lot of programs early in my career. Wastewater is where I started. Worked in stormwater programming, land disposal, active oil field, and have been in water quality my whole career.
I guess I'd give a brief introduction. So background in regional planning and management. My full-time job is project director and practice director at WRAC Engineering and Environmental Firm. So I am very familiar with this room. I used to come give presentations way back in the day on integrated regional water management planning when I was working with the county as a contractor. So I'm here today, obviously, as board chair of the Central Coast Regional Board. I've been on the board now for 9 years. So again, really appreciate you taking time to chat with us today. We're going to go through a presentation. Generally wanted to give you an overview of what the water board's mission statement is. Sure, Dominic can let us know as well. But it's to preserve, enhance, and restore the quality of California's water resources, drinking water, protection of the environment, public health, and all beneficial uses, and to ensure proper water resource allocation and efficient use for the benefit of present and future generations. Generally, take it all seriously at the board level, all the board members and staff. I don't know if you think that extemporate on that, but
No, I mean, and that's overall water boards. So on the next slide, we'll talk about the water boards in general. There's a state water resources control board. The water boards were established by legislation in 1967. So we've been around for quite a long time. There's 9 regional boards for Region 3, the Central Coast region. The state board, develops policy, kind of statewide policy and whatnot. They also drive front the Division of Drinking Water and water rights type activities. Those are activities we don't oversee at the region. We're more on the water quality side of things. We regulate discharges of waste. We manage cleanup sites. And there's we're semi-autonomous. Each region has their own board. The state board has a board. The state board has a board that is actually paid board. They're full-time. All the regions are volunteer boards, and they're governor appointed and Senate confirmed.
Exactly. So we are semi-autonomous. And while we do not regulate drinking water, we do in this region have a lot to do with rural drinking water, particularly in agricultural communities, and have a domestic well testing program that we've been piloting. Yes, question?
I'm just not quite sure I can hear you. Is it microphone?
Well,
so did you say you don't regulate drinking water?
So the Division of Drinking Water at the State Board really leads on the regulation of drinking water. Regional boards do not. Regional boards. Correct. But we'll get to sort of drinking water, you know, in the context of agricultural communities here. So we'll go to the next slide. Generally, in the Central Coast region, just wanted to give you an overview of our priorities. The first one being water quality and environmental justice, and that is really where we get into sort of potable water in agricultural communities as it relates to domestic well issues. Climate change adaptation obviously is a huge focus of our Central Coast Regional Board, and the irrigated lands order, which the most recent order we passed in 2021 and are implementing now. We'll get to that later on in the presentation. But part of that irrigated lands order is a domestic well testing program and the provision of replacement drinking water, and that's generally through the bottled water that we work with agricultural communities to provide through the agricultural entities, the growers mostly, and we've been doing that. Gosh, for the better.
North Salinas to Lompoc.
Sorry.
Oh, continue.
Okay.
No, I just point out, if you're not familiar with our region, we cover Santa Cruz County, southern Santa Clara County, San Benito, Monterey, San Luis Obispo, and Santa Barbara counties. Small part of San Mateo and Kern and Ventura, just little pieces. It's based on kind of how watersheds. The different regions are broken up by large watersheds. So Central Valley is the largest. That's the whole Central Valley.
Yeah, there's actually 10 hydrologic regions in the state of California. There's 9 regional boards, but the regional boards are generally across those hydrologic regions. Okay, so getting back to our overall programs, and these are just kind of a smattering of what we do. National pollutant, so I'm going to speak in acronyms, but we all know what NPDES permits are, National Pollutant Discharge and Elimination System, as well as waste discharge requirements. Specifically our agricultural order, Department of Defense, and the local projects here include Camp SLO and Camp Roberts. We've also worked on a number of site cleanup issues, and again, focusing on those local issues. The SLO PFAS voluntary settlement agreement, Chevron in Guadalupe is also a cleanup item. Land disposal, again, locally, Cold Canyon, Paso Robles, and Chicago grade. And then we have an active oil spill program.
Yeah, and this is just, there's more programs on the next slide, and it's not all encompassing, but we try to include some local projects. Just give you an idea of the kind of the breadth of the programs that we deal with at the water board. The NPDES and WRs are typically the wastewater treatment plants. NPDES, City of San Luis Obispo, Cayucos, Morro Bay, discharging to surface water bodies. WDRs are pond systems. So it discharges basically to groundwater. And then the difference is we implement federal rules, Clean Water Act, through NPDES programs. DOD is like site cleanup on Department of Defense facilities. So we have agreements with the DOD facilities because it's a state entity regulating a federal facility. So it gets a little bit, we have to have agreements in place for them to do that work. And then,
yeah, so the guiding policies for the regional boards are both the Clean Water Act and Port of Cologne. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about the vast extent of programs, including, stormwater irrigated lands, our Central Coast Ambient Monitoring Program. Talk about grants a little bit later on, and then Clean Water Act 401 certifications, which are also in collaboration with the federal government.
Yeah, and I think a lot of you probably know what these programs are. 401 is if you're doing work within a water body, within the high level. It's essentially the high level watermark or the water level of a water body. You have to get a permit with us, and it's associated with a 404 permit with the Army Corps of Engineers. So our 401 certifies that federal permit and the work that's going to be done complies with state standards. Stormwater, we have a few thousand permittees. Those are pretty much the majority of our general order. So it allows, like if you're doing a construction site, you can enroll in an order. You don't have to get a specific permit from us, like a board adopted permit. It's a state board adopted permit, but it allows for a little bit more faster processing. Irrigated lands is one of our bigger programs right now, 400,000 acres. It's a significant land use within our region and a significant source of you know, sources of pollution to groundwater primarily. Is what we're focused on. Also surface water issues and our ambient monitoring, it rotates around the region. So every 5 years it goes to a different part of the region and collects samples of surface water bodies, creeks, rivers and whatnot. It's a snapshot of the water quality. And all that information is actually on our website, the data from that. In our grants program, we work with State Board to get grant funding. And so we have a staff person that's dedicated to getting that grant funding for projects locally within our region. We're pretty successful with that. And if you have any questions with that, you can ask me afterwards. That contact.
We also use enforcement funds for grant programs as well. So when there's an enforcement action taken, the majority of that funding goes into the cleanup and abatement account, which moves to the state board level, but we also collect some of that money at the regional board and provide grant opportunities locally. So we'll talk about our well testing program. I'll let Ryan get to that.
Yeah, so we have a well testing program. It's free. It's for domestic wells. So anybody in the region that has a domestic well can contact us and we will provide free testing for that well. We want to ensure that everybody in our region has access to safe and clean drinking water. So this is our effort to identify those that may not. It actually started in San Luis Obispo County, 2018, and then we expanded it to the rest of our region. We went up to Monterey County and Santa Cruz County, San Benito, and we're now kicking it off in the last year in Santa Barbara counties. There's ongoing implementation. We share data, and it's it's not focused on underrepresented communities, but we really want to make sure we do outreach to those communities. Oftentimes, they're the most impacted by insufficient drinking water and pollutions to groundwater, especially around ag areas. A lot of impact from nitrates on groundwater, historic use of nitrogen fertilizer. We are looking at, with some of the data we're collecting, we're trying to now look forward a bit and potentially look at a pilot project and use some trend analysis. There's a potential for potentially in northern San Luis Obispo County, if there's interest to do another round of well testing and maybe do a little bit more broad parameters and look at well depth as well. So we're looking at that moving forward.
Okay, I mean, so generally when we're looking at this well testing, we're always looking to partner too. So cities and counties, environmental health divisions of counties generally help us to do outreach and engage. And again, to Ryan's point, while this isn't solely focused on underrepresented communities, those are the people that are most impacted through both legacy and ongoing agricultural discharges. Oops. Okay, you want to talk about the results?
So yeah, this is just a broad results from our region. So as you can see, there's a lot of tests that have been gone on in San Luis Obispo County and northern Monterey and in Santa Cruz counties. That's why there's not much in Santa Barbara County, because we just rolled out the program there. The red dots are exceedances. So 45% of the wells that have been tested have exceeded 1 drinking water standard MCL, be it from nitrate, chromium, arsenic, 123 TCP, or chlorate. Generally speaking, nitrate is the one that pops the most in our region because again, we have a large agricultural footprint in our region. So the next slide would be. Good question.
When it comes to the relative cleanliness of Santa Barbara County,
we just rolled out the program there, so there's not as much data. So we will in the next few years be gathering more data from Santa Barbara County.
watch out for perchlorate near Vandenberg.
Yeah, we have a cleanup site. Part of our DoD program for Santa Barbara County is perchlorate cleanup at Vandenberg. And we are also talking to them about the increased launch cadence as well.
So just to, sorry.
Oh, there was a question.
Okay.
What's 123 TCP and where does it come from?
It's a fumigant used in growing, I think, strawberries primarily. So it's fairly toxic and impactful. So that's why we look for it in the sampling.
So sorry, I just went back to the slide. So again, we started the domestic well testing program in 2018 and moved really from north to south. So that's, again, generally why you don't see any sort of hits in Santa Barbara County. And you'll see that, you know, those points are kind of coterminous with the intensity of agriculture within the region.
So this is San Luis Obispo County, just a snapshot. We sampled 223 wells so far and a lower exceedance rate than our overall exceedance rate throughout the region. And I think there's another. Yeah, so arsenic is the leading constituent in our region. That's a naturally occurring constituent, but it's still, there's still a drinking water standard for that. So we do want to make sure that residents are drinking that, they understand that, we get them a replacement drinking water.
And so that's generally from serpentine formations in the groundwater. So again, naturally occurring, but nonetheless toxic. So yeah, let's dive a little bit into the drinking water replacement program. So we've been working on this program for, gosh, I feel like 15 years at least. And that our region has really piloted a lot of this work. So we're really proud of being able to work with communities to provide replacement water. It's quite shocking, honestly, that folks can't drink the water that comes out of their taps most of the time in certain places. So we've been working along with State Board and community-based organizations, as well as the communities themselves and the agricultural community to provide replacement water to communities that don't have access. We're doing that domestic well program, that well testing program. And within the confines of the agricultural order that we'll dig into a little bit, also working on an alternative water supply program to pursue long-term solutions such as, wellhead treatment or consolidation, as well as, treatment at the source. And part of that is expanding the opportunities. We're going through a process of looking at generally, where the most, the highest exceedances are, and what all of that is going to cost in order to work with communities to get short-term, interim, and long-term solutions. And again, whether that's point of use, point of entry systems, consolidation, but that replacement water is just sort of the first tier.
Yeah, and so there is free replacement water for people that do not have clean drinking water. They can reach out to us. We partner with a group, mostly in the northern part of our region. We're expanding down to the southern part of our region. And then also parallel to that, we have been mandated to develop an alternative water supply program in conjunction with our agricultural order and the remit that we've been given by our state board. So we'll talk a little bit about that.
So just pulling back, we adopted our ag order, the most recent ag order that was remanded to the state board in April of 2021. There was a 4-year process to get us to the point of adoption. We had a lot of engagement, a lot of outreach, a lot of public hearings over that 4-year period that culminated in the adoption in April of 2021. And then that order was petitioned to state board by both the agricultural community and environmental justice communities. It was heard at state board in September of 2023, and portions of that were remanded back to us. Chief among those, the requirement for an alternative water supply program to be built in to our agricultural order. And then we had sort of an escalating way of dealing with nitrate limitation. First, including targets for nitrate application on agricultural cultivation, and then limits. And those limits progressively were taken out of the agricultural order. The state board is now convening an expert panel on use of nitrates. I don't know if anyone's following that, but we'll be hearing the outcome of that once it's convened. And we're continuing to implement the order while we're working on that revamp.
Yeah, we continue to work with growers. The growers that we work with are still targeting getting their nitrogen application down to meet those targeted, what the effluent limit, what the nitrogen application limits were. They're not targets. They're still doing a really good job of driving those down, and that's what we're hoping will make a difference in the groundwater the groundwater that's impacted by nitrate pollution. Ultimately, it's the loading. We need to reduce the loading, and it'll take years. I mean, it's taken decades to kind of get to this point for agricultural, the way we've been growing food, and so it'll take a long time to get that cleaned up.
With all the extra nitrate in the water, do some growers find they don't need to apply as much nitrate because it's in their water, their irrigation water already?
There's discussions about that, about how much of that nitrate is available for crop uptake. We do require that they account for that. We have what's called a total nitrogen applied requirement. So growers need to report to us how much nitrogen applications they're doing to their fields. So that includes fertilizer, compost, and what's in their well water.
So through that 4-year agricultural process, we had a lot of expert testimony and research to demonstrate that there is bioavailability of that in the water. And so there is an incentive within our agricultural order, sort of offset to utilize that water as opposed to just applying extra nutrients and nitrogen. So yeah, there's a lively debate again about that bioavailability, but it is, yeah, it's something that certainly we do incentivize and utilize. I think I'd also like to mention that, again, we are continuing to implement. We're working with a third-party implementer, Central Coast Water Quality Preservation, Inc., and they are largely working with the growers, to advance the agricultural order and lowering those application limits. So I just, kind of want to commend the agricultural community. Despite the fact that limits were taken off the table, there's still a lot of work going on to try to advance, opportunities in the region and lower nitrogen application rates. Okay, so we did make mention of that order, we don't need to read the whole water quality order, but generally that was, again, remanded back to us. And so within the language the state board provided is a requirement that we work within our region to provide, again, short-term solutions, which is that baseline level of replacement water, and then work with growers and communities to provide for interim and long-term solutions, again, whether that's point of use, point of entry, wellhead treatment, or consolidation. As you all live here, we all know the constraints of our region. It's really rural. We have a lot of populations that are very far away from urban centers. So consolidation isn't always an option, and it's certainly very costly. So what are those interim solutions? Well, we're still trying to work those out. Again, point of use, point of entry, systems, or, potentially small water systems.
Yeah, and it's a complicated project. We were handed it from state board essentially to develop a drinking water program. And as we said earlier, we don't regulate drinking water, but we do recognize there is a significant need for replacement water for some of our residents. And so it's a priority project for us. And we're working with the grower groups, environmental justice groups. And in tandem to that, we are updating our order as we were required to do, and we will most likely include language in that order that addresses the alternative water supply requirements. And it's a lot of public interest, obviously a lot of interest from the growers, so it's not going to be an easy task. It will be done quickly. It's already taken a year and a half or so. We're still working our way through the process.
Yeah, I think all the easy. Everything that's easy has been solved already, so we're left with everything that's hard right now. Okay, so next steps for our alternative water supply program. We're in the public engagement phase now, which is great. We've reached a point where we feel like at least we've visioned out what we can vision out. And so we will have a workshop at our board meeting in August, and then we have public engagement after that coming up in the fall. So we'll be soliciting public input on sort of the things that I mentioned related to cost. Obviously, these are really costly systems. There's a lot of details to work out. And then we'll open it up for a public comment period and have those public workshops both in English and Spanish.
Yeah, so what we're doing with the cost and needs assessment, those familiar with drinking water, the state board puts out a cost and needs assessment for drinking water for the state. We asked them to carve out our region, and so we're providing a region-specific cost and needs assessment that is also specific to nitrate. So our directive was any resident that is relying on a well that exceeds the MCL for nitrate should be provided replacement water for this project, this program. So the broader statewide needs assessment looks at any type of failing, whether it's arsenic or 2,3 TCP or nitrate. So we narrowed it. We're working on that right now. We'll come out with that short-term cost assessment and needs assessment within the next month or so. The long term is a lot more complicated, so it'll take us a little bit longer to work on that. But we're committed to do that, and yeah, we have a workshop plan for our August board meeting.
And so clearly, we're gonna be trying to leverage resources. Not all of that funding can come from the communities in the Central Coast. So obviously leveraging state and when available federal money to move projects forward. I skipped, yeah.
And now we're just gonna talk about a couple of specific projects in SLO County. So a big permitting effort we have coming up is the Diablo County Power Plant. It was slated for closure this year originally, and it was extended through legislation. They're working on getting an NRC license to extend operation. I think originally it was going to close because the thought was renewable sources of energy we wouldn't need the nuclear power plant because there would be enough renewables to cover that. That hasn't been the case. It produces 9% of the state's energy right now, which is significant. So we are going to be updating their NPDES permit and a 401 certification. The 401 certification goes along with their NRC license because the NRC license is a federal license. We have to issue a 401 certification that certifies that the facility meets state standards, state water quality standards. So the NPDES permit, the updated NPDES permit will ensure that they are meeting full standards. The current permit is from 1990. It's been administratively extended for many, many years. And the issues associated with it historically are obviously, but thermal effects to the ocean and impingement and entrainment issues. There is a once through cooling policy from the state that addresses the entrainment impingement issues.
Yeah, SB, I'm kind of confused between your jurisdiction and that of the State Water Resources Control Board. Essentially, SB 846, in terms of the state processes, gives the State Water Resources Control Board the lead authority among all the various state agencies, State Lands Commission, Coastal Commission, etc. And I remember I think it was November, sometime last fall, they actually had an agenda item where they approved an extension of the once through cooling at Diablo. So could you clarify what issues go to them, what issues go to you? Obviously, there's also the whole federal side, and PG&E is actually applying for a 20-year extension on a federal basis, and probably assuming the state legislature will cave to that in terms of the state process, but it hasn't yet.
Yeah, so that the once through cooling policy is driven by the State Water Resources Control Board. So they manage that part of it. So there's a mitigation fund that any discharger that's once through cooling is required to pay into that fund until they mitigate or until they either choose a different technology or close. So Diablo Canyon was on track to actually close, but they've now been through that legislation been allowed to extend operation. So last year that would have been a state board item on the once through cooling policy. What we will be looking at is the discharge of the once through cooling for compliance with the Clean Water Act. So it involves a lot more than just that impingement and entrainment part of it. It's all discharges and effects from that discharge on the ocean.
So you'll be monitoring the impacts of those discharges and have a public hearing?
We will have a public hearing. We will have a workshop as well and a public hearing on the NPDES permit and the 401 certification.
Because we regulate the discharges. So the regional board regulates the actual discharge
discharge.
itself. And so, you know, the discharge from that plant is 2.5 billion gallons of water per day. So while the policy is held at the State Water Resources Control Board, we're doing the actual implementation and the regulation of that discharge from that outfall.
So I might have missed that 2.5 billion gallons, what is that? Ocean water? What
Yeah,
is that?
so they pull in ocean water, they cool facility, and then they send it right back out.
And they put it back out to sea.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's why it's called once through cooling. It just, it goes through.
So you can see that discharge. I don't know, do we have a little pointer here?
Yeah.
Where is it?
At one.
Well, that's not it. Where is it? Anyway, is it the bottom?
Yeah, I think.
Flip it around.
Flip it. I'm not adept at this, the red one. Okay, there you go, thanks. Yeah, so there's the outfall. So you see all that water coming out there.
The intake is below it in that code.
The white?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Any other questions?
Any guesses to the timing of the workshop and public hearing?
Workshop, we're targeting in the fall. We're still planning it. The hearing, we're looking at early 2026.
Thank you.
Potentially February.
Any other questions? Okay, so we heard you talking about desal, and we know that you will have a USBR grant to do a desal study. So currently in our region, we have the Santa Barbara facility. That is a relatively old facility and was re-permitted through the last drought process relatively swiftly with the previous administration. So that is a permitted existing facility that is operational now. And there is a proposed desal facility on the Monterey Peninsula, the Cal-Am project, which will be intaking through slant wells in the city of Marina, and then discharging through Monterey 1's extant outfall. We're going through the process right now of working with the applicant, the Cal-Am, on a marine life mortality study, which every project needs to go through. The sensitivity obviously is not only the price point associated with desal, but discharge into the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary.
Yeah, so another NPDES permitting project that we have coming up in probably middle of 2026. Highly political, if you've heard anything about it, it's been going on for a lot of years. It's to offset some of the water. There's a cease and desist order from the Division of Water Rights at State Board for the Carmel River. So there's a certain amount of water that can be taken to the Carmel River. Cal-Am was issued a cease and desist.
It was a cease and desist order, yeah.
And so this is part of this is to augment and replace that water. So there's a lot of political politics involved. Our part of it, again, looking at the water quality impacts primarily through the discharge, the outfall at Monterey 1. Looking at what type of, they'll have to change diffusers that could have impacts on marine life. So they're running a study right now, collecting data. So we'll evaluate that and update. It's actually an update to the Monterey 1 NPDES permit. It's their outfall.
So again, we're just one of the regulatory agencies, similar to Diablo. We are one of the regulatory agencies that regulate facilities. So it's, you know, California Coastal Commission and ourselves and state lands and a bunch of other folks that have their hands in the cookie jar there. So any other questions on this before we move forward? So we'll talk about not one of our favorite tasks, but certainly something that we do as a regulatory entity is engage in enforcement efforts. And we wanted to just bring up two that are relatively recent and local. San Luis Obispo County Airport was a voluntary settlement agreement. So while we're categorizing under enforcement, everybody did come to the table and we did ratify a voluntary settlement agreement in 2023 related to the PFAS impacts from the airport and the use of AFFF. And we're continuing to meet with the community on a monthly basis. We've been meeting with them for almost 2 years now in the implementation of that voluntary settlement agreement and not only the monitoring of those wells, but the inclusion of treatment systems for all of those residences that have been impacted by PFAS. And then at our February meeting, we had an item related to the California Men's Colony and the persistent wastewater treatment plant effluent violations into Churro Creek. So we worked with US EPA in tandem on that enforcement action. I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was a $1.6 million penalty. Our board can assess penalties if there's violations of waste discharge requirements, or in this case, it's an NPDES permit. NPDES permits also have mandatory minimum penalties that they can be assessed. So if they violate effluent limits over a certain amount, we don't have any discretion in that. So some of that 1.6 million was mandatory minimum penalties, and then the other was other violations, including there's a water treatment backflush discharge into Churro Reservoir. Some of that money we were able to put into a supplemental environmental project, which is our free domestic well testing program. We were able to get approval from the state board to make that a standing supplemental environmental project. So if we have certain types of violations, we can divert some of those funds into that so that we can do more well testing.
And have local benefit, right? So oftentimes when we have an enforcement item, we want to see that money through a supplemental environmental project mitigates the impacts of that discharge or that enforcement item.
Good question.
Thank you. When did that treatment plant issue occur?
It's been over the last couple of years. Yeah, there are several violations. It takes us a good amount of time to get an enforcement item in front of our board. So I believe the violations were in 2022.
Since the pandemic, excuse me, or during that period?
It was during and after, well.
They've been violating for
Yeah,
the better part of, I don't know, 2 decades.
they have chronic issues at that facility.
So there's resource issues and, you know, I think the Department of Corrections isn't in the wastewater treatment plant business. So I think there's some difficulty.
So are you dealing with the CMC or are you dealing with?
Decades to deal with them.
Yeah, we're dealing with California Men's Colony, right? Because they are actually, you know, operating the wastewater treatment plant, but they are under the State Department of Corrections.
Yeah.
Questions? Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about some of our accomplishments. So we've talked to you at length about the water well testing program, the grants program. These projects that you see up here were the Rose Foundation grant specifically came through the funds through cooling policy violation money. That was for Diablo, gosh, a long time ago, 20-some years ago. Diablo Canyon had an enforcement action and they violated the went through cooling policy. We had a huge amount of settlement funds that, again, went to different parts of the state, also came to us. And so because of that, we were able to release grant funding. And then we also have an Oso Creek remediation of pesticides project and a Churro Los Osos Creek sediment reduction project that we're granting.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of specifics about these projects. It's just to highlight that we do try to get grant funding into, this is just for San Luis Obispo County. We get a really good amount of grant funding within our region. We have a great grants program manager, Katie. She does a really good job of getting these resources into our region. Again, just to highlight that we not just in the business of enforcing and penalizing folks, we do try to get funding to come back into the region in various forms, whether it's grants or state revolving fund loans, low interest loans. And so again, if you have questions about that, feel free to contact us, reach out to me, and I can get you in contact with Katie.
Yeah, and generally, we want to sort of close on the accomplishments, because while we have our regulatory agency and do have enforcement authority, we don't lead with a stick. We lead with discussions and collaboration and work with community. That is generally how we interface with everybody that we work with. We're here to dialogue because I think we're all working towards the same aims. So.
Yeah, it's much more efficient for us to work with you and try to do that. The enforcement part of it, it takes a lot of time and resource for us and for the discharger and those involved. So we always prefer to go down the path of collaboration.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any non-point source surveys going on? I was thinking, of course, of the case where Mercury was getting into Lake Nacimiento, and they had their eye on the cloud. The thorough survey of the entire Nacimiento and San Antonio River watersheds for Mercury at that time. And I'm thinking that Sunrise Creek is constantly out of compliance on bacterial avalon. And the city of San Luis Obispo says that's not us. So somehow or other, there's a large bacterial content getting into that creek, and something has to be stopped somewhere. But it would be with you guys to fund some sort of research to find out where it's coming from.
Yeah, that's a difficult one for sure. We actually have a TMDL, total exploitable bacteria for San Luis Obispo Creek. So it's been an issue for many years. There's a lot of different sources potentially, and that's what makes it a challenge. The city's wastewater treatment plant discharges into that creek, but they meet all standards for the most part. I mean, occasionally there are violations, but not bacteria related. There's unhoused that live along the creek. There's wildlife. There's a lot of potential sources. But we can take that as an idea of potentially finding some grant funding to look into that. It's complicated, but.
Early on, you had a slide that mentioned various areas of projects. One said Chevron Guadalupe. Is that the old Unical Guadalupe diluent spill?
Correct. Yeah, it's an ongoing cleanup site.
But I would like to know more about that, since I was with EcoSlow when we first got the board awareness, and then there was the whole Coast Guard and everything, the whole big movement to clean up. What is going on out there right now, and what efforts are made, and how much diluent has been either bioremediated or kept out of the ocean or the river like that?
That's a great question. It's an ongoing cleanup site. I don't have answers for you in terms of numbers, but I can get our staff to contact you. It's been going on for decades. It will be going on for decades. I know that there's a tremendous amount of material, hydrocarbons that are still in the subsurface that they're dealing with. We actually permitted a landfill out at the site. They were taking it to Santa Maria landfill. We permitted a site out there, so they put in liners and they're remediating soil and putting some of it in that landfill. But
Was all the sheet piling removed that was put in there early on the early portion of that project?
I don't know. I think they remediated that part, and so they could take the sheet pile out. But I don't want to speak. I don't have the details on that.
So we can get you those
Yeah.
details and get it to Brendan, and Brendan, if you want to just share that out to the group, certainly make that happen. Yes, sir.
In your domestic well testing program, if an owner makes a call to you for well testing, does that trigger longitudinal testing of that well, or is it one test per call?
One test. Yeah, it's a snapshot. We get a test and then determine whether there's any exceedance of MCLs. And it's up to the owner of the well what they want to do next. And then we offer services in terms of getting replacement water. It's really up to the well owner.
Yes.
Yeah, you showed the slide there that had San Luis Obispo County and ag well testing, and that ag well testing, that is not free, correct? That is charged to the growers.
No, it's.
This is domestic well testing.
Yeah, this is domestic well testing.
This is not the ag testing. So there's there's requirements for testing under the irrigated lands program for growers.
Right.
Okay.
And so that's not free.
And so that's, I realize that, because I paid the bill.
Yeah.
And so those exceedances there aren't related to the ag
Correct.
program and technically tied to
Well,
different-
They're
They're
related.
domestic, they're domestic wells, so they're not associated with compliant, those that are enrolled in the irrigated lands program.
Okay, so I have
So,
an ag well and you're and a domestic well.
Right.
So the domestic well could be shown on that.
if you called and asked for sampling, potentially, we sampled it, but if it's covered by a regulatory program, typically we wouldn't go in and provide free testing for that. It's.
Yeah, no, it's not free. I pay.
No,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
you're-
that is not covered
right.
in here. Yeah, no, this is a
So it's
separate
not
program.
shown there.
No.
So my question is, you know, I keep getting the test back and just due to the circumstances that you described, very low nitrogen use or deep pocket for, is your experience that would change from year to year? Or you see, you always got the results of my testing all my neighbors year after year. We keep getting the same very low results. Is it possible to maybe skip a year and save us some money?
That depends on the requirements in the order. If it's part of the compliance with the order, that's adopted by our board. At a staff level, we can't make changes to that necessarily. If it's part of the monitoring and reporting program, we can make those changes. But if it's part of the permit, which is the order, if it says you must do that on an annual basis, it's difficult to make that change. But it's something we consider. I mean, we typically, after we get a significant amount of data, we can look at whether there's a need to continue to do the monitoring at that same frequency.
Yeah, I believe you dropped the 1, 2, 3 trichloro.
We do. We drop the 1, 2, 3 after a certain period, right? If you don't get it in 2 hits, I think, then that requirement drops off.
You have to pay for all of them.
Exactly. That drops off within the order after, 2 hits and you don't get the 1, 2, 3 TCP. But in terms of nitrate, that is an ongoing requirement on an annual basis for you to comply with.
I have a question.
Yes,
How do you reach out to the private well owners? Because I'm a private well owner, I've never helped.
Yeah, we have an outreach program. We're not going to be 100% successful, but we've got flyers. We have it on our website. I don't know the specifics of how we reached out in San Luis Obispo County. That's where we started, but it was in 2018. So I'll have to revisit.
So do the commercial companies that perform this water testing that you utilize probably around the state? So it's different.
Yeah, we have a contractor.
So then if a private well person like me went to them, would they have known to tell me that there's an actual grant available? I mean, I just don't see how I would have found out.
Yeah, so there's flyers. We've done outreach again through EHS. So we try to partner with entities to spread the word, but no, none of our vendors are going out and soliciting or, providing that promotion for us.
Oh.
Yes, you're welcome. But we're always happy to, get some tips and feedback as to how
Well, I
to better
tested my
improve.
well this past year, and I used their services down in San Bernardino County. Very happy with the results, but clueless.
That's a great point. And so that's something for us to note as to another way to promote the program. Thank you for that.
My question's around the general order for wastewater discharges above 100,000 gallons per day, and the board's stance on permit renewals and funneling agencies into that general order, particularly with regards to the salt limits, right? Oftentimes, many North County agencies, their drinking water is going to see the wastewater hard and fast limits, right? So I'd first like you to speak to that, like that, the effort to funnel everyone into this general order.
So it streamlines the regulatory process overall. It supports, our staff in focusing in on items that need more of their attention. And it's been a benefit for both our staff and I think generally for wastewater treatment providers, because then we're all at the same standard, right? We don't have these varying standards that are from 20 years ago. And so it's a helpful process and sort of evening the playing field. I understand there's differentials and who's treating what, the size of communities and economy of scale, but There obviously are benefits to moving everybody into a general order.
Yeah, I mean, it's efficient for us. We have hundreds of dischargers and we just don't have the resources to update each WDR, each permit for all those facilities. So the decision was made, let's do a general order. It makes it consistent for all wastewater treatment plants, so it's more of a level playing field. It used to be if you had a newer permit, essentially you're held to a different standard than some kind of 19-year-old permit. So in one way it levels the playing field, but we recognize that there are areas that have challenges when it comes to meeting some of our standards. In particular, our basin plan has set standards for salts, and absent of a change to that basin plan, it's going to be a challenge.
And in view of that, where the drinking water exceeds the end of pipe salt limits, right? There is an option that allows the discharger to do groundwater monitoring for what appears to me an unspecified amount of time. To what extent is the board willing to go with that option too? My understanding is the board is pushing communities to regionalize an approach to manage salt to meet those limits, right? Which is extremely expensive for these small communities in our county. So to what extent is that option to monitor acceptable and promoted rather than being heavy infrastructure promoting?
Well, if it's in the order and it's allowed, then it's allowed to do the groundwater. Ultimately, that's what we're concerned with. It's just impacts on groundwater or surface water. In this instance, if you can show that you're not or adding to the problem in groundwater, that should suffice. In terms of regionalization, that's typically, historically, we have pushed facilities to regionalize. We found that smaller facilities often have harder time complying. It's the economy of scale. You get a bigger facility, higher grade treatment plant operator. They tend to stick around more. Our experience with some of the smaller facilities in our region, or the smaller the facility, the harder they have keeping a plant operator at the site. Oftentimes they're feeders. So they'll go in, they'll get a couple years experience and then they'll move on to a bigger facility. But yeah, typically and historically, we have to push regionalization, fewer permits for us. It's more like one site as opposed to 3 or 4. But we recognize that there is expense.
But we haven't successfully dealt with salt, so we do need to deal with those issues. And I'll shut up now.
Okay,
Yes,
we got one last question.
You mentioned a number of programs, things are going on, and there, I assume there's mailing lists associated, like the alternative water supply costs and needs assessment, the Diablo Canyon workshop, and hearing the grant opportunities. I didn't know you did local grant opportunities. So is that one mailing list, or is that 3 mailing lists? I want to know personally, and perhaps the group want to know as well. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we can get you that information and get folks signed up for. But yeah, there's not just one catch-all. You're going to want to opt into the issues that you want to follow and things that you'd like to hear about.
Okay,
If you get us that information, we'll put it in the minutes.
Perfect.
Yeah,
okay.
There probably is a grants one, but with its specific projects, they're not going to be a mailing.
Okay.
You can go to our website and oftentimes click on the different topics. But yeah, specific projects.
And for the grants, for example, we utilize the Rose Foundation to help us implement the overall call for projects. So the Rose Foundation in this most recent case, sent out the call for projects. We did as well. We sent out our own mailers, but we also rely on folks who are supporting us in that process. But we'll get you that information, both the Chevron Guadalupe item and the mailing list, get that out to you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your questions.
Thank you, Jane and Ryan. Right. Next up is Wes Thompson to give us an update on state water policy.
Hey. 2:30. How y'all doing?
Good.
Thank you for the opportunity to come and share a little bit about the status on our draft policies that are in development to address primarily the opportunities for water and wastewater transfers or new contracts with the San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. Maybe we'll change that to something, but for now, the district. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to come share and also to listen to get your feedback and comments. I would like to mention there are others here that are part of the process of developing the draft policies, which are in your board packet. Nola Engelskirter, call a few people here. Raise your hand. All right, Peter Brown, Rosemary Gaglione, and a few other folks that have been especially participating, also with the State Water Subcontractors Advisory Committee. So this is quite a process. We've been working on it for the last year. And I'm going to try to push through the updates that I want to highlight for you, and then we can have some questions, time for a little Q&A at the end. No slides today. Okay, probably one of the most important things you're going to want to know is the dates, these upcoming dates. Make note of July 8th is now the new board date, just changed yesterday. We were set to go on the 17th. There were some items that came up on the 17th date. So we're going to move that to the 8th. Hang with us, July 8th. And then for those keeping track, we have a State Water Subcontractors Advisory Committee on August 8th. I believe it is Friday, August 8th, second Friday of the month. Peter can fact check me on that. We anticipate going to the board on July 8th. And frankly, we don't know if this will be a one and done or it could be a two-step process. We do expect to get the board's feedback and have been working to get a lot of input from folks that are not necessarily the existing subcontractors. So we're navigating that process. But today, I want to kind of highlight a couple of updates from the last iteration of the draft that you saw a few months back. And then we'll talk about, I think there's one question that keeps coming up, which is, how can my agency or my community or my system potentially access the surplus state water? And how does this policy relate to that? And then what happens next from today or after the policy gets adopted by the board. Okay, so I think we've reiterated over and over again that the goal of the district is to maximize our state water contract that it has with the State Department of Water Resources for 25,000 acre feet of table A water. How do we do that in a way that is organizationally efficient and so that we are aligned with both state and local goals and priorities, while balancing the district's obligation to its existing subcontractors, and putting itself in a position where it can take advantage of the opportunities to use the surplus state water to meet local needs? That's kind of in a nutshell the goal and the question. To the extent that it concerns use of state water locally, the district board sets the priorities for the district, which is a wholesaler of state water to local agencies. So that's a really important point as the district brings in this water in partnership with DWR and our neighbors to the south, Central Coast Water Authority, who is contracted to operate the coastal branch in our area. And then that water is delivered to two, sometimes three turnouts in our area. And then it enters our local systems, whether that's the Troll Valley's pipeline or the Lopez pipeline or CSA 16 in the Shannon area. So that water is delivered to our local turnouts, and then the local systems, which may have their own governance, own water management policies and priorities. So we're trying to reflect that in this draft policy document. The other key point I want to make at the outset is that these policies are intended to be guidance. If adopted by the board, they will guide district staff as we continue forward with the next steps in the process to look at potential changes to the existing subcontracts, other contract options that would allow for expanded access to state water, process and procedures that need to be developed to administer a program to make water available on a temporary basis or to facilitate permanent transfers, or so that folks know, okay, if I want to get a new contract for state water on a supplemental basis on one of these new options, how does that work? So these policies are just policies. They tend to be guidance. They're a snapshot of the board's position on the matter at the time when they're adopted, and they will guide staff. But the board is not limited by these policies. It can change its mind. Subsequent boards can change their mind. And the board is still subject to its existing contracts with the subcontractors. And DWR. And CCWA. Okay. So, I got like 5 highlights I want to make. Number one, I think we've tried to clarify. Let me back up a second here. 2 major updates since the last iteration that you might have seen prior to April. As we've been working through this process, we got some questions and decided maybe it makes more sense to separate out temporary transfers from permanent transfers. We tried that, got bulky, we reconsolidated everything and tried to simplify things. So that's reflected in this version. And then there are a number of other simplified policy sections where we've tried to bring in some refinements and kind of carve out the content that was more process or procedure oriented, so that we can address that separately. So those are some things that you hopefully noticed in this latest draft. Okay, so on to the 5 highlights. How am I doing on time? 2:40? Okay, trying to push through here so we can get to some questions. The first one I want to just call attention to, we don't need to deliberate on it necessarily, but the right of first refusal principle is we've tried to affirm in this draft policy document. It is informed by the district's existing contractual obligation to the subcontractors. It's a principle that the district has had for almost 25 years, I guess, or 20 years at least, with respect to the excess allocation and how it would go about handling that. And it's necessary to ensure that the subcontractors have a secure and reliable water supply as we expand access to others. And frankly, I think they would argue that, hey, we've paid for this for the last 30 years and we've made the investment, and actually the district had all of the costs for the coastal branch that serves the subcontractors, that's been paid for by the subcontractors, not the district. And there's some technical things we could talk about, but I'm going to leave it at that for now. I just wanted to highlight that. We added in a policy recommendation for the board to establish a resiliency reserve of 5,000 acre feet of the district's 25,000 acre foot contract. That would, the actual water that would materialize from that would vary from year to year. Just as the contracts that the subcontractors have vary from year to year, in theory, based on the annual allocation. We can get more into that later if you want. We, in the draft, this updated draft tries to clarify the prioritization. And I don't know, there's too much more to say on that other than we fit. I don't know that I don't know that you're gonna notice much in that way. I think it's just more streamlined and refined. Anybody else who's been part of that process with the subcontractors wants to have some comments, but let's leave that there for now. Let's keep moving. One of the, I think, significant points, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, or at least mentioned the basis for this earlier, was that there's a point in the policies that it tries to reflect or establish a policy rather that the district would recognize that management of the state water down to the Turnout and Coastal Branch is within its oversight. Once it goes into local systems, like the Tor Valley Pipeline, like the Lopez system, that water is entered into another system that will have its own governance, its own management priorities and policies. The county and or the district may be a part of that. For instance, like the Zone 3 system, the district owns and operates the Lopez transmission line on behalf of folks down there, but that's a different system for management policies than what we're talking about with this state water policy. So I don't know if that's clear. We can talk about that more later, but I wanted to flag that. Okay, the last one. There is under criteria for use in one of the last sections of the policy, talk about eligibility. There's questions that we've received about who's eligible. The focus on the policy is to underscore the district's existing partnership with its existing subcontractors, and that the public water agencies in our county would be its primary partners. There are alternative pathways that are available to those that aren't public water agencies. We can talk about what those would be. So the policy reflects that the district here is partnering with local public water agencies with a publicly developed water supply to bring in an imported supply. And so we're trying to create some structure here that would address organizational efficiencies and not work against the state's goals of potentially consolidating systems where that's appropriate, or adding complexity to small systems where they may lack the resources, both technical and managerial, to bring in an imported supply. Well,
Is there a placeholder for Los Osos in all of this? Because I believe that Los Osos was going to ask to connect with the pipeline, and presume they're not an existing user.
Yeah.
So is there a placeholder in all this that allocates for future use by ourselves?
That's a really good question. I'll come back to it at the end. Thank you. Okay. These policies are intended to be guidance. They're not perfect. They're not going to address all of the scenarios and situations that that we have here in our county, frankly. The policies don't seek to address alternative water supply options. They don't address the potential bring in other non-state water from outside the county. They don't address, how to get state water from CCWA. They're really focused on the district's contractual opportunities that it has. And so I think that's just important, a footnote important to make here. Okay.
So that we can get to questions. We just wanted to give a really good background on all the work we've done for the state water policy. So what they are intended to do is set up a framework for the board to make decisions on these transfers. So we've been approached, right? There's interest. We know there's been interest. We were directed by the board to prepare these policies. So it is a framework for making this decision. It establishes that state water is a supplemental supply. It establishes the reserve that Wes mentioned of 5,000 acre feet. It also establishes the priorities for state water, which is, and it maintains that subcontractors have that first right. And then eligible users. So that's the framework for helping our board to make decisions. But it is just a policy. We're going to take that to our board on July 8th. And right now we can take questions on it.
Thank you for your favors. I have a basic question. Is there a agreed upon definition of supplemental? For example, if an entity that takes water then approves a development they would not otherwise approve because they have state water, is that something other than supplemental? What is the definition of supplemental? And is it being consistently observed now?
So there is a section in the policies that describes why it's supplemental. I don't think, we didn't add a definition section to the policies, but supplemental would be not your primary source of water.
You have other sources.
And also, we talked about supplemental water, sense of water that's not already been allocated. So I think Nola and Wes, kind of high up, backing up. We calculated back to 1996 or 7, and on average, in an average year, 25,000 acre feet, and we're supposed to get, we spill about 8,000. Right? We lose access to 8,000 acre feet. So part of this effort is to take the 2003 1 or 2 page set of policies that previously existed, that have rarely been implemented, update those so that we have more flexibility in how we recoup costs for ratepayers, provide water to folks that need them that aren't current state subcontractors. And so I think those of us that have been on the working group have been trying to develop this framework for the board's consideration so that in the future, this could be months away, entities, agencies who want access to state water that hadn't previously had it can get that. And then those folks that have excess water, surplus water, can provide it.
I think without a clear, unambiguous definition of supplemental, however firm the rest of the policies may or may not look, it's going to be very muddy in application.
Yeah, before you go,
Yeah, go ahead.
So to David's question about, is there something set aside for Los Osos or can you restate the question?
Yeah, where in this pattern does Los Osos sit? It's not an existing body of water.
Yeah.
And yet it's an expected future use.
Yeah.
So what you just said, it sounds like all they get is supplemental. If I understood your answer to the last question, everyone else has got theirs, and anything left over maybe Los Osos gets. Is that what I'm reading?
Yeah. Possibly. I mean, it depends. That's the answer because there's the existing capacity in the system is all spoken for. So to the extent that that becomes available on an it's going to become available. It is available. On average, it's maybe 1,000 to 1,500 acre feet of unused capacity is available. But it's scheduled and you have a procedure you have to work through. How do you go about scheduling the water delivery so that it's available to meet Los Osos's needs when Los Osos needs that, right? So if it can do that under a contractual framework that works for Los Osos and works for the other existing users, then there is the potential for Los Osos to get some state water on a supplemental basis. There's also the opportunity for one of the existing subcontractors to potentially resize its contract with the district. So let's say that, I'm just throwing something out. Let's say Morro Bay doesn't need its full 1,300 acre feet on an annual basis, and they realize, there's a financial obligation to pay that annually, whether I use that or not. And if I'm only using 1,000 acre feet a year, I could reduce my financial obligation. That could free up both capacity and water supply for Los Osos. So there's a process and a procedure that needs to be established to work through those kind of questions. And for Los Osos, Los Osos is going to have to figure out what's the best way to access the state water. Is it going to be through waiting until maybe there's an opportunity to become a subcontractor? Is it through a partnership with the county or one of the other existing subcontractors? Is there a future option for supplemental water that will meet its needs? And maybe it doesn't need to become a subcontractor. There's opportunities to create potentially an improvement district, and they could bring water in on an as available basis. They could work and form a new CSA out there. There are a number of different options, and those are kind of the questions that will have to get worked through next.
Isn't the question of supplemental answered in there because it says the state water system shuts down once a year, and if you're relying on that water for your domestic use, you better be prepared for it to shut down. That therefore means it has to be supplemental to be the primary source.
Correct.
And to Eric's point, we have discussed not just supplemental water, but there's a lot of terms in the policy document that do need specific definition. And I think staff has committed to working with subcontractors, of course, legal, to make sure that all of the terms are defined. That's a good point. And I think also
By July 8th.
No, probably not by July 8th, but the reason why I bring it up is because while this is a policy guidance document, it also is going to need some implementation, right? So I think we've committed to also developing a set like staff level implementation, how we go about addressing requests that meet the policy guidance.
I think Jim was next and then Christine.
Yeah.
Go
So my question is this, and I understand that the subcontractors take priority. So, and that's mostly the municipals, the cities, correct?
Yeah.
So historically, how much out of the 25,000, or excuse me, it's about 5,000 acre feet, right? How much of that have they used is historically?
At most in a given year, 4,400 maybe. I would say in a given year, maybe 4,400, maybe
So most
at peak demand. No, that's in a peak demand over the last 10, 15 years. But I would say on average, it's closer to probably 36 3,800, probably right in there. Some years less.
And they have first right of refusal.
Yep.
So you're gonna set a reserve of another 5,000 acre feet.
Yep. From
Correct?
a contractual standpoint. So if the allocation is 10%, that'd be 500 acre feet of water that would go into, that would be part of that year's reserve. So it depends. But the 5,000 acre foot baseline taken from the 25,000 acre foot contract. Yeah.
And that's your number one priority, correct? For the
That-
subcontractors?
That water would be first made available to the subcontractors to meet their needs under their contracts, whatever those are at the time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. The discussion I've heard here makes me feel that I'm not sure I understand supplemental. It's starting to sound to me that supplemental is a temporary acquisition. Los Osos can get some water if Morro Bay doesn't need it, but then if Morro Bay needs it, it can take it back, and all the other contractors, if they have extra, they can give you some supplemental water, but then if they decide they want it, and you've already made some big subdivision, you need your supplemental water, you're up a creek. Am I wrong here? Did I hear that wrong?
It's like the,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
if you wanted today to start up a water mutual and have development around you, you couldn't have one source of water to do that. You have to have more than one source of water today. So I think the idea of supplemental is this is in addition to whatever your existing source, even if you don't feel your existing source is adequate, I mean, if it was, you would be looking for supplemental, right? But if you, even if it was, it's still, it's a supplement to your primary water source. We're now talking about temporary transfers, but in the future, there's the potential for permanent transfer. But again, the state water project, it's kind of like Lake Lopez. If it doesn't rain, it doesn't matter how much water you're entitled to, you don't get it, right? If the groundwater is too low, it doesn't matter how much you're entitled to, you can't pump it. The same thing with state water. So it's impacted by the drought. You have issues. So you wouldn't want a community to put all its eggs in that basket. And it wouldn't be right for the county to let a community go down that road and then have people not have water to create. The whole idea was to sort of, how do we take the water that isn't being used and try to fill an existing need, but not create a new need? That's based on a supply that is not guaranteed. It's not even guaranteed in the full amount of a year to those.
I think I can get it.
And then the
Yeah,
last
so
thing
the-
to kind of close, did you know?
I was just gonna piggyback on what you were saying. So, yeah, the goals of the policies is to maximize the use of that water every year. It is to outline and have staff look at all those opportunities. There will be next steps after the policies are developed and approved by our board. They will give us direction on probably soliciting, what are those water needs in the county? Who has water available they want to maybe reduce or increase their allocation. And then give us guidance on which of those priorities they want us to push forward. And then as part of that effort, our contracts limit how that water gets moved around in our county. So we would have to modernize our contracts so that they more look like DWR contracts. So DWR contracts, there's the water management tools and state water contractors are able to, exchange water up and down the state between each other. That's something that we're looking into doing here locally, but the first step is these policies give our board some direction so that they can give staff direction to move in that direction.
So after you go through your priorities, then why wouldn't you open it up to private companies to be able to utilize it? If you have priorities and it goes down. For an example, you have it for Golden State, for example. It's a private entity. Why wouldn't you open it up to them if you're not using all your allotment?
Well, it could happen. This is the starting point, a launch point for our boards, but if there are no public needs, right? And we still want to maximize that
Yeah,
water.
but it doesn't read that way now.
Yeah, you look on 4B, it says,
Yeah,
will not be
restricted.
contracted to non-public
Only
water.
public
agencies.
use and, well, I'm just reading what you have in.
It's
Absolutely.
And it's our starting point, so
Yeah,
that's where.
it's your starting point.
Right.
And that's why at the beginning, I brought this question, how can we get access, right? And the policy doesn't address all the multitude of ways that you could potentially get access to state water in the future. So it could be that Golden State, for instance, partners with Los Osos CSD, and they get access to that way. It could be that Golden State partners with County GSA out in the Etna Valley, and that's how they get access to state water through a public partnership. But not a direct partnership with the flood control district. That's the structure we're trying to put in here.
To even have ag on there is one of the priorities, the second priority down. But there's no way for ag to access any of that water the way it reads right now. It's too restrictive.
Take that into
There's no
consideration.
vehicle. Can't happen.
No.
Unless they do a special district, which is very difficult to do.
Is it? Yeah, it's difficult to do a special district.
Just a comment.
Okay. I mean, that is a special districts have been a great way for folks to get access to surface water supplies that are imported. So and that is what the State Water Project is in part, right? It works with our other special districts. Central Valley Project is the same way. Yeah. But point taken.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, our goal is to be able to bring this water in and maximize that.
I think right now, the way it's written, if you're gonna present it, it's very restrictive.
Okay.
And if you're not using all your allotment, and capacity in the line, it's better to open it up. At least the taxpayers can recoup their money that they're paying for it.
Okay, point taken.
Other questions are coming, go ahead.
It mentions a couple times that you anticipate amending the subcontractor contracts with respect to these policies. I don't understand why those contracts need to be amended, because they have such credit receivable right now. And presumably, they already have the ability to sell their water to another agency as long as it's within their contracted allotment. What's the reason for amending the contract?
Yeah, short answer.
So they
That's a good question.
don't have the right to just sell. It is district water. They have a water service amount, so it's basically like a service contract. And they do not have the right to sell that water or move it or assign it. They don't have storage rights. So those are the things that are reflected in the DWR master contract that aren't transferred down to the subcontractors right now. And so those are some things that could be clarified or updated or modernized, that would give each water purveyor more management ability to move their water, use it, transfer it as they need to, which would also release more water to be used and maximized in our region. So that's.
But that would seem to contradict what you just told him, in that if you had another user who wanted to partner with an existing subcontractor, they could buy water from that subcontractor that was not already being utilized under that subcontractor's agreement. So they do have the ability to sell water.
These policies are intended to establish a foundation for the next step in the process, which would be amending the contract so that there would be congruence between the two, so that the subcontractors would be able to do those things. And so the policy says we would support those things being possible, but their contracts don't currently allow them to do.
Other questions or comments? Go ahead.
And the subcontractors really the cities and the counties? Is that predominantly who it is?
There's quite a variety of
Uh-huh.
subcontractors. There are institutions like.
Don't they usually work with the cities?
The
Not that
majority of the
closely.
cities aren't members.
Name
Aren't
one
subcontractors.
for me, 'cause I'm not aware of
CMC or
the
Cuesta
subcontractors.
College, CMC or Cuesta College or the San Luis Coastal Unified School District. We have some county service areas that are, we have a few cities, we have a few CSDs, we have a couple mutual water companies. Yeah, so it's kind of all over the board.
And they were created by the areas? Is that the way they did it?
They all. Yes, and I understand the question.
Okay.
Yep.
There are 5 cities that are not member subcontractors: Rio Grande, Atascadero, Grover Beach, Paso, and San Luis Obispo. Also non-members are Cambria CSD, Heritage Ranch CSD, Los Osos CSD, Napomo CSD, San Simeon CSD, Templeton CSD, Atascadero Mutual Water Company, Golden State Water Company, Shannon San Juan Water District, and the Estrella El Palomar Creston Water District are not subcontractors.
Yeah, the Golden State's not a.
You saying those are not?
Those are not.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the majority of the cities, certainly the majority of the population, like the city of San Luis Obispo,
Right.
are not.
I know there's a lot of area around here that basically their homeowners are using their wells. And we talked about water quality in the last, and it would minimize the amount of better water quality if they had access to some of the state water, because it's treated water.
Yeah.
So.
It is once it goes through the treatment plant.
Yeah, correct.
But there are alternatives under study to take a turnout before it gets to the turnout plant that would not be treated water.
Yeah, so if our goal is to get better use out of it, it's better to open it up to be able to have all the urban people be able to have access to it, even though there may not be in a subcontractor's district.
Yes.
You know, well, it seems restrictive. I remember I was living here when this was first happening. And what was said was, if you don't buy in now and help build this, you don't get any water in the future. So there are those of us agencies that put in the money and went ahead and paid for this in full.
Yes.
And so even though it might seem restrictive if you're not an agency that paid in, those of us who are subcontractors are saying, hey, well, we paid for this, so we want to make sure that we're protected. I think it's a great thing that it's opening up, and that might be a way of looking at it. At least there's opportunity existing going forward that didn't exist if you did, 10 or 20 years ago. This probably would have been thought of.
Yeah. I just think in the 90s, maybe here was more of a agricultural area, didn't have the housing that they have now. And, it's, people maybe made a mistake. I would have probably bought into it if it was me, but we can't hold that against them now moving forward. If we're not using all the water, it should be more accessible. That's all I'm saying.
And as Wes and Miller are saying, this is the broad umbrella, and it's sort of like when the board finalizes this policy, then their decisions going forward will be, does this violate our policy? Or is this within our policy? So all these refinements can be made.
That's why I'm commenting.
Any other thoughts or comments? All right.
Yeah, so this is just that first step. The board will give direction to staff on July 8th. We'll consider these policies and then give direction to staff on next steps. Those next steps would be moving forward with some of those procedures, bidding contracts, soliciting water needs through the county and figuring out what are those opportunities and where we can apply these policies, hopefully.
Okay. One last thing, does anyone wish to make a motion to support the proposed policy?
I would like to know that we recommend delaying its movement to the Board of Supervisors until there is a clear definition section relative to some of the questions that have come up today.
Is there a second to Eric's motion?
I'll second that.
Right. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, we'll take a vote, but I think we should do it not by voice.
Yeah, so this will be a motion to delay.
Delay, it's placing it before the board.
So just to be,
Until there is a clear definition section where some of the terms that have been questioned and ambiguous today, certainly including supplemental.
I think this committee advises the Board of Supervisors, so I think you can frame that as an advisement to the board.
To delay.
You don't
Okay, so
advise
my
staff.
advice to the Board of Flood Control Water and Conservation District is to delay action on any plan that does not contain clear definition of supplemental and other terms that our records will reflect were ambiguous in our minds today.
That's your restated motion.
That's the restated motion.
Jim,
My
are you still
recommendation
willing to
is that the
second that?
board not act on this document until it includes such a thing.
Jim, are you willing to second?
Change.
I don't think his,
Are you willing to
I had-
second still? Is
Yeah.
change?
Well, I don't really know what I'm seconding at this point.
well, I,
It was kind of hard.
no, I think
to
that
understand.
was clear. The distinction is the original motion was for staff and that the
Did we
the
define the
advisement, the
definitions?
advisement needs to go to the Board of Supervisors. So Eric rephrased his motion that it should be, the board should delay adoption of policies until it includes definitions. I know I'm shortening it, but
That's
that's the idea. And so instead of direct staff to delay going to the board until there's definitions are done, it's the advisement is to the board to don't adopt these until the definitions are in place. Again, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's the idea.
Now,
So-
staff may decide based on the spirit of that motion to change it to timeline, but we don't direct staff.
All right.
We don't advise.
You've made your motion, Eric. Is there a second?
That's very.
I'll second.
Thank you. All right. Any discussion? Yes.
So could you speak about the implications? And what Mr. Brown mentioned was that likely, so to get all these definitions would potentially go into a subsequent phase, you're talking about implementation.
I'll
I
defer.
can talk about it.
Well-
So there's been a group of us working on this policy update for about a year. And the working group believes that these policies provide a lot more flexibility for both existing state subcontractors for water, for the county, and for those that are in line that are interested in getting access to state water. And so that is all positive. I don't think there's any question that supplemental water refers to water that is not a primary dedicated source for people that have it. State water by definition can only be a supplemental source. It's not a primary source for any of the state water contractors. There's not a lot of controversy around that. So I think county staff could probably best address Ms. Lowe's question, like what happens if we don't go to the board on the 8th? But I think for those of us that are interested in not spilling water, making use of a resource that we're underutilizing, providing more flexibility to those interested in accessing the water, delaying isn't good for anyone.
I see a hand back there.
So, this is a draft, so it will be coming back to the house, right?
No.
No, it won't be, it's just draft until it gets to the board and is approved.
Any other comments? Not, Brendan, will you call the roll?
Sure. District 3, Jim. This would.
What's that?
It's asking you for you to vote.
Okay, I'm gonna be a no vote.
Tom, District 4.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna make sure
I am voting no against Eric's motion. I think we should go forward.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
Ag at large, Mary. Tim, development at large.
That's a no.
Environment at large, Christine.
No.
Environment at large, Eric.
Yes.
Environmental at large, David.
No.
Coastal San Luis RCD, Dominic.
No.
Attachment Mutual, Jamie. County Farm Bureau, Steve.
No.
Shannon San Juan, Steve.
No.
Silver Grande, Ali. City of Pismo Beach, Marshall. Jan left, right? Yes. Cambridge CSD, Tristan.
No.
Heritage Ranch, Scott. Los Osos CSD, Chuck. Napoma CSD, Ed.
Yes.
Oceana CSD, Peter.
No.
CSD, Lori. Anyone in the room who is a member and I didn't call their name? Oh, I didn't see you come in. Matt, sorry. Golden State Water, Matt.
No.
Was it no?
No.
Thank you. I apologize, Matt.
No way.
Okay,
So,
I believe the motion fails.
motion fails. Yes.
So is there anyone willing to make a motion to move forward? Yes. Is there a second? David? Any discussion?
Is that a motion that the board adopted because we're not advising staff?
The motion is as.
Read it. Shall I read it?
Staff recommendation.
Staff recommendation, Wes can read for clarification.
The staff recommendation is to recommend that the district staff present the proposed draft statewide project transfer policy to the district board for consideration, with the understanding that subcontractors or others may continue to provide comments or suggest refinements prior to or during the board's adoption process.
So the staff recommendation is legally problematic because we don't advise staff. The spirit of your motion is that the board adopt it when they get it.
No, the spirit of, I'm recommending, the board.
Consider it.
I'm making a motion for this recommendation that.
And it still reserves the time and space for you to make more comments.
Yeah.
And feedback.
We're basically saying, we're planning to go to the board on July 8th. And with this draft as proposed, acknowledging that there may be other comments, other input that may affect things as we take that step forward. And so your recognition is really to the board that it consider this.
You need to read that back, Brendan.
Yes, just, I think I gotta have the board consider these draft policies.
All right.
And with David's, I'm sorry, David
David
Chip, thank you.
All right. Will you call the roll again?
Yes, sir. District 3.
Yes.
District 4.
Yes.
Ag at large, Mary.
Yes.
Development at large.
That's a thumbs up.
Thank you. Environment at large, Christine.
Yes.
Environmental at large, Eric.
No.
Environment at large, David.
Yes.
Coastal San Luis RCD.
Yes.
Tuscarora Mutual. County Farm Bureau.
Yes.
Shannon San Juan Water District.
Yes.
City of Arroyo Grande.
Yes.
City of Pismo Beach. City of Slow, Jan left. Heritage Ranch.
Yeah.
Cambry CSD.
Yes.
Los Osos CSD. Nopomo CSD.
Yes.
Oceano CSD.
Yeah.
And Templeton CSD. All right, thank you.
Did we get everybody in?
Oh, and
Golden State Water. Right, motion carries. Right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
very much.
All right. We will move on to item 5 then, the update from county staff on the Central Coast Blue.
Right. We haven't had this long of a meeting in a while, so I'll try to be quick. And especially the WRAC's role is, you know, frankly, I'll just open with this, is a second opinion on this matter. As I'll get into the RWMG did meet this morning, and I'll kind of explain a little bit about that, but I want to just start with that as we get started here. So.
Okay.
This item is to receive an update from staff on the Central Coast Blue Project's award in the Prop 1 Round 2 Integrated Regional Water Management Grant and consider actions. So I'm going to go real quickly at 6 slides on just a brief overview of IRWM and the RWMG, what the grant award process was, the status of the project, and next steps and recommendation, and then we'll have a few minutes to hear from Pismo Beach. So first, IRWM is the Integrated Regional Water Management Program. This is established by the state in the early 2000s, and was a program designed to have agencies working together to solve agencies and NGOs working together to solve common problems related to water, water quality, water supply, environment, many other things. And the carrot to that was the state via various propositions over the years providing funding to do those projects that come out of this collaboration. The way it works in our county, every county is a little different, and even some IRWM regions aren't counties, but for us, it's our county. The lead agency is the District Board of Supervisors, and we have our Regional Water Management Group, which was created by state law that directly advises and implements the creation of the IRWM plan or guiding document, as well as responding to grant opportunities. So we have an RWMG, it meets as needed. And again, like I mentioned, it met this morning. That RWMG takes recommendations to our Board of Supervisors via staff and implements the plan, responds to grant opportunities. Prior to this morning, the RWMG had last met in 2022. A grant award process is quite long, from the draft documents from the state to the agreement for the funds. It's a 24-month process for this last round. And I mentioned that just because it takes a long time. It's a very detailed and public process. And part of what goes into that, I'm going to highlight here, in May of 2022, projects were presented to this committee, to this WRAC. And then after that, were scored and ranked based on criteria in the grant and their project readiness. This goes into an authorization from the board to apply for the grant. First, staff authorized to apply, then the actual application submittal, award, and then eventually an agreement. So there's a little bit of a timeline there. We're now at the end of 2023. We finally have our agreement from the state. And that leads us to an update about Central Coast Blue, which is many of you may know, has experienced a number of challenges and difficulties since 2024. I'm not going to go through headlines, the details. That's not why I'm here. I'm mainly here about where the project is today and frankly the bind that the county is in related to administering the grant. So, moving on from how things have happened, where we currently are is what the county believes is a significantly different project than what was applied for and awarded by the state. And as I'll get to, we're in the timeline that project cannot currently meet for a scope that is reduced from what was said they were going to do. And from our standpoint, that puts the funds at risk. And if you've read our recommendation, we are asking the board to direct staff to go back out and see what projects are out there and what's available that could meet the schedule. And so as you can see, the current Central Coast Blue project is reduced in its benefits, in the number of wells, has a construction completion date well after what was said. And what's important about this June 30th is that's our current term date of the agreement, which will come into play when I talk about the amendment process in the next slide. And the last thing to note is the project was submitted as a multi-agency regional project, and it's no longer that. And I've gotten these details in as been communicated with city staff the last couple of months. So given that, we are at a crossroads with the grant and this project, and given how long it takes to implement changes in the grant agreement, whether it's bringing in projects or going through an amendment or different things, staff has a necessity for a decision. And one of the main pieces here is that construction has to be completed by March 31st, 2027 for every project in this grant agreement. And we're at a position where any scenario right now requires an amendment. And we do amendments for these grants. We've done amendments without going to the board, but the types of amendments that frankly I think are required all need direction from the board to do that. And so this is why we met as an RWG this morning, why it's coming before you for the WRAC this afternoon, and why we'll go to the board this summer. Really, there's two options for the amendment, and that's the first would be to amend the grant with the current version of Central Coast Blue. I think this option has a very low likelihood of being successful, given the reduction in benefits and the push out of the schedule. Some initial conversations with DWR, they do not like to do amendments for projects that are not in construction. They quote said for projects trying to figure it out. And so I give us a very low likelihood of being successful here. And either way, even if DWR was sure, send it in, submitting an amendment for a project that extends the grant term with less benefits, as staff and as management at the district, we don't believe that's in our authority. The board has granted us to administer the grant, given how significantly different the project is that was recommended. So we would need that direction from the board to amend the grant. It's a bit wordy, but that's number one. Number two would be amend the grant with replacement project or projects. This is our recommendation, but to go ahead and do this, to open a call for projects and to come back to the board with replacement opportunities would also need that initial direction from the board. And so that's what we were coming with. As you can see in our recommendation, we are going to the Board of Supervisors and requesting direction to open up a call for projects to see what else is out there. Are there projects that can meet the timeline and the terms of the grant, and compare that against, and go through the scoring process and everything set up. This would be all run through our RWG. I will note that, so there's a recommendation. The RWMG this morning voted 6-1 to move forward with staff's recommendation, which is what's here. And a few things I do want to note is that the Pismo would be welcome to resubmit this project or any other projects. They're not barred or banned like that. And projects, we would be looking at projects would need to be constructed after they are amended into the agreement, but before the March 31st, 2027 date. So that window is shrinking, and that timing is why it's really why we're here today. I don't feel like I can wait any longer. We need to make a decision, have action. And so before I take questions on anything, as my quick overview, I did want to give Rosemarie an opportunity to let everyone know. You may not know, Pismo is still working on the project, and I'll let her give her a chance to speak.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. I'm Rosemary Gaglione. I'm the Public Works Director for Obispo Beach. And I do want to say that the project has not been dormant. There's been a lot going on behind the scenes. And while 350 acre feet is not 900 acre feet, the application did say up to 900 acre feet. And it did say up to 4 injection wells. We still believe there is a benefit to all by injecting this water into the basin, because it will help stave off seawater intrusion. And it doesn't mean that this can't grow, and it doesn't mean that others can't partake in the future. This is not where I disagree with staff is in saying that this is a significantly different project. This is still a groundwater recharge project. This is still taking treated wastewater, super treating it, putting it into the ground to be pulled up later. Nothing new. Orange County's been doing it since 1975. But what we have done is, since we lost 2 of our partners, we were looking at the amount of water that Pismo Beach was originally slated to figure on using of this. I think of all projects that come up, ways to recharge the groundwater, to create new water should be considered primary. We know that we have a certain amount of groundwater allocated to us through entitlements. We can't necessarily use it all. We have water in Lake Lopez, and now more of that's been having to be spilled for steelhead. So we don't get all of what it looks like we're entitled to. With state waters, we just had the conversation. We don't get all. We're not guaranteed all. So we need to make the best use that we can out of all of our water sources. What I would hope to see, as I would have hoped to see this morning, is to allow us to begin construction, because DWR does amend grants to extend the construction deadline to get into construction, which we believe we can be in before the end of the grant period. There's a risk to closing this down, and opening this up again and finding another project and taking that to the board. And I think as Brendan said, he would think that would mean there'd be a new project potentially signed in March of 26, and that doesn't leave a lot of time either. So we believe that we can get started in construction before the end of this, before the deadline, and that it is not completely outside the realm of possibility that the Department of Water Resources would go ahead and grant that time extension. And I know it's late, so I'm not going to go on. We do have other funding partners. So there are funding partners that we have, state and federal, who believe in this project, even with the reduced amount of water that we're producing. And we do have the ability to apply for state revolving fund money. So we're moving forward. We would hope to also have this money, because every dollar of grant money we get helps to lower the cost of the ratepayers, the cost of this project. Thank you.
I know we're past time, but I would take some questions. There's some.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
So it sounds like it's either or. We can't do both. We can't. There's one grant and it's going to be either amended or amended first. Or is there?
Could we do both?
The parallel suggestion.
I think the board could direct me, staff, to officially seek an amendment. There's a grant on Central Coast behalf. So that is a possibility. Even if we're not directed that way, that could come out in the call for projects. But that's not just something we do amendments as normal administration of the grant, but this is outside of that normal administration.
But I guess the question is, where you say there's two options, it's either option 1 or 2, it's not.
Yes, I don't see us keeping Central Coast Blue in the grant and also some other project that would work. Yeah.
I think Jim and then Tim.
Sure, we make a motion. Do we need a motion on the?
I think we're doing questions just first.
The RAC generally weighs in on IRDM related items.
Okay.
Doing questions.
Mike, is there an advisory body at the state level that can provide any feedback on which is the best option on that, or is that just like top?
As far as public processes, those are all local for each IRDM region, so.
But I mean, as far as these options, if you amend the grant. If you amend the grant with replacement projects, are you taking Central Coast Blue out?
Yes.
Oh, you are entirely.
Yes. They could reapply.
Reason.
I will point out that the recommendation we're taking to the board is to go open up the call for projects. It's not to declare Central Coast Blue dead. It's not to do anything like that. It's to direct us to start a process that we feel will give the maximum assurance that the funds are going to be spent in our county in the time that they're supposed to be spent.
So, Jim.
Oh, sorry.
No? No, you go ahead.
Sorry.
Who wants to go?
No, it was Stacy, right?
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what our public works director said, which is we will start this project by the time that this grant period ends, correct, Rosemary?
That's correct.
So we're moving forward. And I don't want to go into all the negativity of what happened with losing our partners, but we're moving forward. It can be larger than we're seeking at 350, and if we produce more water, we can, others can have use of that.
Okay.
Not as familiar with knowing what program it's not partners. But and I'm sorry, this is a dumb question. Is it all about the cost that were these programs? Or were there other? Is it just that it got to be? So.
For me, for the grant, the cost has nothing to do with that one. But I mean, what happened with AG Grover Pismo, I don't know.
I was just curious if the proposal on the table right now is just to allow to continue receiving benefit of the grant, and they're saying they can meet the criteria. Saying you can meet the criteria.
They would have to spend $1 million by March 31st, 2027. I have not seen anything that says that's gonna happen.
I just heard her say that she.
Yeah.
That's the first time that she's, sorry, but that's not what you said until right now, so.
So when you say that much money, it says construction complete. They're saying they can start construction. So we're talking about the state. Start by March 31st, so this particular grant is for completed.
The grant says that all work shall be completed by March 31st. So all work in the scope, in the work plan.
They're all.
The invoices would be June 3rd.
Okay, but I think my point in saying that, and I did mention before that we'd be starting construction before the end of the grant, is that DWR is does and has extended the construction period if a project is in construction. So that is the possibility. There was question is if we didn't even start construction, being an implementation grant, would DWR be as likely to extend? So I'm saying if we could get
You guys are so.
done before the end of the construction grant, then perhaps DWR would be amenable to an extension on that.
I've got one technical question. If the old thing had re-injection, but not all necessarily around Pismo Beach. If you see that in the Aurora Gravity floodplain, for example, where are you going to put your water? That is, because your agency is now the only person getting the advantage. Where do you put your water?
We own a property in Grover Beach where the injection well, or the injection wells are going to. And that's where we would inject. And so instead of putting other injection wells, other areas, we can do that. Understand too that we're putting it all into one big pot of water. So we put it in here. You know, you don't need a pipe for someone else's benefit. If that was a decision someday, it's all going into the ground.
Very altruistic.
I do have a question for Pismo Beach. If we were to pursue the staff's recommendation, or at least as I see it, option one, and ask you to reapply, what would be the effect on your project? Would it hinder it? Would it kill it? If we said, look, you're still eligible, you just have to perhaps compete with others for the money. Or would that be the death knell? And you would,
Oh, it would not be the death of the project. It would be an
Okay.
increase for ratepayers, but a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. So
that I understand.
we know we have what we have now, and then being able to reapply doesn't necessarily mean that our project would be looked upon equally. There might be other, you know, we
Yes.
all have our human thing,
That I understand
right?
too.
And we're not just computers. And so I would be concerned that the project wouldn't be perhaps fairly judged because of previous hiccups.
On the list project came in 2022. Was there any remaining projects that, because this one has changed, that could be considered, not, maybe looked at again, that were already dropped for the board?
Yeah, there was one project that was not awarded, so I think there were 6 submitted. 5 were recommended for award, and that agency is currently seeking a solution. So I don't know if that project will continue. That's why we would have to reopen a call for projects to generate a new list. Otherwise, the state's preference is to go back to the original response, but ours would be no other projects would start over again.
It sounds like, the grant currently says the funds need to be expended by a certain date. Sounds like Pismo is confident that they'll be able to start construction by that date and is optimistic that there would be an amendment possible, but that is not guaranteed. And it's not one that the district typically, it's not a type of amendment the district typically does. But there's optimism that it could happen. If it doesn't happen, then whatever funds aren't spent are just lost.
Yes.
Does Pismo have to pay them back?
Yeah, that's right.
There would be nothing to pay back. It would just be the funds were not
They
spent.
lose
They'd
the
be gone entirely. There's no pot to go back into.
Okay, so it's just hopeful that an amendment,
So this risk, the funds in my frankly, not just our management's opinion, is that the funds are at risk currently. And going back out to a call for projects, would, seeing what else is out there would reduce the risk of losing the funds countywide. This is not the first time this has happened. We went through this in 2018 or 19, since in CSD. So where funds appeared at risk. Again, the option of submitting an amendment to extend the term I would need that direction from the board of supervisors, and that's not our recommendation at this time. for a project with reduced benefits and extended schedule. Yes.
The regional water management group unanimously voiced an opinion.
Yes, they were 6-1 for staff's recommendation, with Pismo Beach being the one.
Brendan,
Yes, sir.
if you online, if that's okay.
Your
comments?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Okay, just didn't want to keep folks waiting. I see you had a comment from Jeff Edwards. Jeff, you can unmute.
Yes, good afternoon. Having followed CCB for some time, I find it highly unlikely they can get any kind of land use permit for the project, let alone start construction or complete construction by March of 27. Please don't risk losing this $1 million. I urge the support of amending the grant with replacement projects, and please ask the board to call for projects. Thank you.
Last one, okay. Any other comments? All right, I'll entertain a motion then.
I'd like to move that we adopt the, what's the name of the group this morning?
The Regional Water Management Group.
The management, I move we adopt the management group's recommendation and call for a new project.
Or new projects, right?
It could be project or project.
Project, oh, yes. Is there a second? Right? Any discussion? All right, shall we call the roll again?
Yeah.
I hope we have enough. We still have a quorum, correct, Joy?
We'll find out.
We'll find out, I guess. All right.
Okay, District 3, Jim.
Yes.
District 4,
Yes.
Ag at Large, Mayor.
Yes for me.
Tim, thank you. Environment at Large, Christine left. Eric. Dave left.
David's here.
Sorry, Dave.
No.
I apologize. No, okay. Coastal San Luis RCD. Tascadero Mutual,
Yes.
County Farm Bureau,
Yes.
Golden State Water,
Yes.
Shannon San Juan Water District, stayed. City of Arroyo Grande,
Yes.
City of Pismo Beach. Jan left. Cambridge CSD.
Yes.
Heritage Range CSD.
Yeah.
Los Osos CSD. Chuck left. Napomo CSD.
Yes.
Oceano CSD. And Templeton CSD.
We have a quorum and I think it passed. Correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. That wasn't an easy one. Okay, on to ongoing updates. I'll run through this quickly in the interest of time. Rain and reservoir report. If anybody has anything, please speak up. Drought updates. Groundwater basin management efforts.
Just saying, in Paso Robles, we are going to go 218 ballots for self-assessment, but it might be on extraction fees. Those ballots are going to be mailed out, I think, by tomorrow Friday.
When do they due back, or when is the voting date?
I think, August 1st. It's right on the.
Okay, very good. Also on groundwater updates for Paso, the county issued a study just on the 23rd of May entitled Paso Robles Groundwater Subbasin State Water Project Supplemental Water Supply Project, State Water Project Supply Options and Costs. Lane really set this out. comments are due back on June 22nd. Essentially, it talks about taking excess state water and diverting it from the pipeline before the treatment plant and using it to replenish groundwater in the Paso Basin and options for that. There's a cost and supplies option study, and that's about 50 pages that I think is really interesting reading. And then there's an engineering study that's about 150 pages, which I've barely started to read, but I imagine it's also of high quality. So I commend those to your use or your. Pardon me?
Where can those be found?
Blaine really sent out an email to the people on the Paso Basin mailing list. Joey, I can get you, we'll put it in the meeting minutes, the link to that, but it's on the county website. Anything else on groundwater basin management efforts? Not, then we'll go to flood control zones. Integrated regional water management. I think we did that, a lot of that already today. Master water report, anything? Nope. State water project, we also talked about that. DSAL. Various county water programs, policies, and ordinances.
Eric asked me to announce that the budget hearings are starting on Monday, the 9th. And there's a draft of the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan being released.
Ah, yes. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, and they're taking comments on that until the 9th, I believe. So, and a link was sent out to this email list about the hazard mitigation plan update and how to comment on the draft. Stacy has comment.
And I thought there was supposed to be some kind of report at the meeting or some kind of state event in July.
Regarding the consolidation analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't hear about an update on that, and we had a full meeting, so I didn't really push them on that. Might be something that comes out this summer or perhaps in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on programs, policies, and ordinances? Open reporting on water conservation opportunities and information. All right, we go to item 7, which is future agenda items. Anybody have anything to add? Lastly, public comment for items not on the agenda. Anybody has any energy left? All right, if not, I will adjourn the meeting. We'll remind everyone that we are dark in July and August, so we'll see everybody after the Labor Day holiday in early September.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much.